Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me for another episode of The Journey. In this episode, I'm going to explain how my uncontrolled sexual activity and poor choices resulted in the death of my son. In 1999, 2 months prior to me being released from jail, I was notified by my mom that I had a 6-month-old son. Once I got out, I immediately went to Ryan's house to see him, and everything seemed to be well. But to my surprise, his mother had given her rights to her mother, Stephanie, who is a chronic alcoholic and was determined to have full control over me seeing my son, as well as having any type of authority in his life. She was charging me child support by being on welfare and told me that, she would not get off the welfare. She didn't trust that I could pay for my son. So one day, I called her and had requested that, we get rid of the child support as I had family that was willing to help me take care of him and that, we could just share the financial burden. She did not like that idea and told me that she didn't believe I could pay to take care of him. I stated that he could just come live with me, and, she was adamant about him not coming to live with me as it was pulling on her heartstrings. Yeah, right. She wanted the money. She would ultimately set the foundation for my son not having any real oversight in her care, resulting in me not being in his life as a father, as she dictated the visits as well as who the authority figure was in his life. She wouldn't adhere to the court order visitation and would actively let my son know that she had the final say in all our dealings. I was attending college at the time, and I'd have to take time out of school to go to court. And I did see my son as much as I could, although my son's best interest was not taken into account. So by the time my son is 16, his grandmother's calling me, and she's talking about how he not listening to her anymore, and that he had didn't want to follow the rules of the house. And I'm pretty sure he was a 16-year-old boy, and they have no control over him. And so she suggested that, he come and live with me in an attempt to kind of curb his bad behavior. And for me, I was like, well, it looks like, you created something that this is going to be really hard for me to try and overcome, but hesitantly I agreed, and he began living with me. But at my house, I had real rules, and he was not happy with the strict oversight. I had to know where you are, who you with, what are you doing, and he didn't like that. So, and there was a curfew at my house. He definitely didn't like that. So after about 2 weeks, he said he was going outside to give his friend some clothes, and he just never came back. So about a week after he left, I had talked to him and found out that he went back to his grandmother's house. So, I believe he went back over there because the oversight was not strict, and, he was allowed to kind of live his life in the streets. But me, I just wasn't going to condone that type of behavior, and I knew where that could land you. But, never did I imagine that it would, take my son from me. So the night he died, I went to, Janisa and Stephanie's house, and the uncle was there, and he was drunk. And, he began like ridiculing me about how I was never in my son's life, and that had I been there, this would have never happened. Now, mind you, I live 2 freeway exits away, literally like 3 to 4 miles away. I was upset. I was furious, but I didn't say nothing directly to him. I felt like he was a part of the problem, as he lived in the house with my son and literally made no effort to curb the behavior, that they knew about. Like, I had no idea about this stuff, which resulted in his death. So once I got in the car with my cousin, like I was so mad. I was crying, and I was like, the next time that MF sees me, he's going to wish he was dead, and about a week after my son's death, Janice's mother, Stephanie, called me, and she's, random conversation, asked me, hey, how you doing? And I replied, "Oh, I'm okay." And, she stated, well, I'm not okay. And I was like, I was like, you're not okay. I was like, you shouldn't be okay. When I said that, she lost it. She started cussing me out, top of her lungs, and then I would wait until she stopped to get more air. And then I would continue to tell her, like, it's all your fault. She hung up on me. I called her back just to tell her again, like, my son would still be alive if you did your job. I then proceeded to point out the fact that they had not called my phone this much when my son was alive. So she was looking for me to absolve her of the guilt she had. And I refused. I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to rub your back right now in this situation where you guys didn't have my son over here, all these years, and you've been, making him believe that you're the authority figure and to listen to you. So no way am I going to tell you it's okay. Okay. So pretty much I never spoke to her again after that. And then she passed away in 2023. And I believe it was from having multiple strokes, from just, they wouldn't stop drinking. So I had seen the uncle probably like 2 or 3 years after, my son passed away. And he looked like he had a really massive stroke as well, you know, and he was an alcoholic too, but when I saw him, I was like, whoa, like you look really messed up. And so I got on the BART train and I was heading to work and I was sitting on the train and I felt this huge relief come over me, and like I began to cry as I was like realizing like how the universe had kind of came through for me, and that the words I said and the emotions I had actually generated that experience, and so, words that are filled with emotion is the way that we manifest in our lives. And, at this point, the universe was kind of like hugging me on that train and it was saying, I love you, Jimmy. And that it was, giving me my heart's desires, and the uncle stroke looked really bad, like he felt like he wished he was dead. So in 2015, my son, so I never had dealt with like, I really couldn't even go and find out what happened. All I knew is my son was dead and I was trying to move on. Right. And I remember, thinking about the person that had shot and killed him. And I immediately forgave that person. I immediately looked at it like the person who killed him, they had a rough life too. Like something in their life did not go according to plan, right? And that they were once a kid that was probably neglected, whatever the case may be. But it was just so easy for me to find the forgiveness in my heart for that guy. And so, for a long time, I could never go get the police report so that I could read it and see exactly what happened. But I want to say this probably was like 4 years ago, maybe. So in like 2020, I went down to the police station, and I got the police report and I found out that he had been shot and killed as he tried to rob somebody with a fake gun, which turned out to be a cell phone in his pocket. And so this whole ordeal kind of like shook me to the core, right? I was like, whoa, since he was a baby, I understood the environment he was living in was not a good one. So when Ryan passed away in 2015, I was so upset at them and myself. And I had to deal with, the guilt of not doing enough. And, I always thought about it in the way of like, what could you have done? Like, you could have done more. You could have went over there. You could have caused a ruckus, right? You could have kicked over stuff and pull your son out of the house, but then I kept thinking like, well, what was that going to do? Right. Because at the end of the day, I have to go to court. I have to prove that, these people are unfit, which is like really hard to do. So you really have to have, like a ton of physical abuse, or severe neglect. Okay. So, I began to go to therapy for this. And so when I go to therapy, the therapist really helped me grapple with the guilt that I was feeling. And, I had believed that I just didn't do enough. But the therapist showed me how I did all that I could, and that the neglect of the people he lived with is kind of what got us here, But over the course of 6 sessions, I was really able to kind of release that guilt, find forgiveness for, his mom and the grandma. And so, years later, I would realize that by having like no control over my sexual activity, like I had attracted to myself a dead son, and ultimately I would realize that I could not choose myself and do the thing that would save my son, as I cared about how others would feel, even when I knew the best actions to take. You know, um, I believe I was not only thinking of how the grandmother and mother would feel, if I had full custody and he lived with me, but also I would, have to go to court and I would have to really prove all these things, and then to top it off, I knew how much he really loved his mom and, his grandma. So I totally did not want to do that. To this day, Ryan's mom still calls me, and it's funny that I'm recording this episode today because she called me yesterday. And whenever she calls me on the phone, the first things that she likes to talk about is Ryan, and how much she miss him and, how she wish he was here. And, when he first passed away, she would call me like once a year around his birthday, and she would be hilarious, just like hysterical about, like it was the day of. And I had to tell her one day, like, hey, look, Janisa, you can't call me like this, like I'm trying to move on past this. And every time you call me like this, it starts to kind of bring up these feelings that I've already kind of dealt with. And I can see that you haven't dealt with them. So, so now when she calls me, it's really light and she tries to call me in a light way, but I can still tell that, she's really having a hard time dealing with this. She's still struggling with alcohol. Her mom's passed away. So, she kind of lives in like a women's shelter, and they kind of house her in hotels wherever they can. But, the fact that adults are not really paying attention to their actions. And on top of that, there is, some really like deep traumas that both people have went through that they haven't resolved. And then you have a kid together, you know, um, really impacts a person's life in a way where you kind of have to, take a step back. And this is why I'm learning this stuff so many years later, and the reason I'm really giving out this story and the stories that I will be telling you guys is because I really want people to be able to go in and really see, what kind of person am I, right? What kind of person are you? And really, understand that you're going to impact not just yourself, but everybody else in your life. Okay, so in the next episode, I'm going to take you guys on a journey of lies, cheating, and betrayal that pretty much ultimately woke me up out of my slumber to a life on fire. Until next time, you guys, I love you.